I really do like fresh air. And there really are birds even in big cities. So just any place where I can have that feeling of just connection to the larger world, and I'll always meditate. And particularly when I travel, I make a real point, you know, if I can, before I do anything, I'll make sure I have a good extended time to meditate, and if I need to sleep a little also, of course. I think just from a very practical standpoint, my own personal theory is that 90% of jet lag is really your mind and body are not integrated with where you are physically.
Right.
Over and above the fatigue and tiredness of travel. So I've learned, for example, one, if I meditate, it really makes a huge difference, and I always do. So I really adjust to time zones very much more quickly. Secondly, of course, all this is not just in the episodes when you're sitting, right? It's about your attentiveness in whatever you're doing. So that I've gotten much better at noticing the arising of particular phenomenon that people call jet lag, which I never liked the term, only because it's too abstract. Like, oh, you're very jet lagged. I go, well, what the hell does that mean? Is that something, an airplane up there that's behind another airplane? You know, but you know, learning what it means very particularly in terms of thought forms and physical feelings. So I can really see that when it starts to occur. And I've learned if it's just a simple sitting doesn't work, I've found for me, I go and lay under a tree. And I guess I've come to understand it's that earth connection. That so much of the phenomenon of difficulty of travel, you're just not here. So if I really get spacey, which is kind of one of the common things you experience when you cross a lot of time zones, you just get kind of spacey at a certain time. You're not even really quite tired. You're just kind of here, there, you know, I'll go and find a tree anywhere, just lie down under it. And usually 15, 20 minutes, I'm like, oh, you know, it's all come back together. And then the other thing, of course, is just the busyness. Because anybody who travels a lot often is doing it because there's a lot of things they're doing. And for me, you know, I could easily make a trip to the other side of the world and have a week with, you know, 18-hour days. People would just fill it up. So I usually try to keep that from happening, for one, but then also just, you know, when I can feel myself getting fatigued or getting a little disconnected from what's going on, just the ability to take a few quiet breaths and reconnect internally. You know, just a variety of little practices like that. And clearly, that's the kind of direction of all the contemplative cultivation, is that it's not just episodes of sitting or doing your Tai Chi or whatever it is. It's really how you live, always.
So you've been talking mostly about your personal practice and relationship with contemplation. What role do you see it having in organizational life? And this week you've been at the Garrison Institute for an education conference. So maybe those are two questions in terms of the educational system and in terms of organizational learning.
Well, I think that, you know, whenever we're really drawn to something, as I've obviously been drawn to some sort of cultivation, meditation practice for virtually my whole life, it's because it's something really important to us, not just at a personal level, but also in terms of like why we're here, our work, and whatever way you would understand or anybody would understand, well, what's my work about, what am I here to do, and how am I here to contribute something. So, as I said before, I think in many ways, this kind of deeper reflective space has been a foundation of work we've done forever. And I think if you were to step back and say, what's the health of an organization all about? What is organizational health and well-being? Or what is social health and well-being? At one level, it's our ability, our relative ability to be present with one another, and to be present individually and collectively to whatever our reality is, and our challenges and our difficulties and our suffering and whatever we're trying to accomplish. So in that sense, I think it's more and more clear to me that this is really the essence of everything we do. And I guess over the years, particularly one of the big differences over the last decade has been getting to work more and more beyond the business world. So we'll do lots of projects that might involve business people, but for example, this week is really about, can we start to build a community of people around the U.S., eventually this has to be global, but around the US today, who really can work together effectively for the transformation of education. We simply do not have a system of education which in any way, shape, or form matches the realities of the 21st century. The kids know it, many of the teachers know it, a lot of us know it, but no one has a clue how it's going to change. So I don't think it takes a lot of thinking, really, and it was interesting to me to hear a lot of comments being made spontaneously as we went along the day that isn't, education about helping kids learn to be human beings? Mm-hmm. I was telling some of them a story today of a project we have in China starting a new school. It's the first school the Communist Party has authorized to be based on traditional Chinese educational practices, mm-hmm. starting in kindergarten. And as I'm telling people the story, it was just a small group of us talking. They were really excited because one, it was a great validation because a lot of them are trying to do very similar things in their own schools. But then, it became quite poignant because they say, well, look you're talking about all these things they do with the 5-year-olds and the 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, like calligraphy and recitation, which is a form of chanting, mm-hmm. and Tai Chi. And then the kids are just outdoors playing all the time. And, they're just like being kids, and you're supporting them in the natural human activities that they would do at that age. Mm-hmm. Now, when they're the age of 8 or 9, it's a little different. The age of 10 or 12 is a little different. Obviously, 13, 15, then 8, it's all a little different. But, if you think of it, what's education supposed to be except find the natural developmental activities for people at different stages in their lives, starting very young. I remember years ago, some educator and then somebody eventually wrote a book saying, no, the only thing we seem to have even close to right in education is kindergarten. Because mostly you can walk into a kindergarten seeing kids doing what more or less they'd be doing naturally. Mm-hmm. But from that point on, it's a big machine. Mm-hmm. And it's a grinding and crunching and forcing them into this machine. And the stress level on kids in school today is just horrific. Yeah. The extreme competition and, the anxieties of grades and tests. And do I get into the right college, and managing their parents' anxiety. A lot of the kids, I think, spend as much time trying to manage their parents. It's just all nuts. Mm-hmm. None of it is what you would call what you would naturally be doing to grow as a human being at that particular stage in your life. So in that sense, yeah, education would be all about developing as a human being. And I think you could say the same thing is awry in most areas. I mean, we work on all these big sustainability problems, food and water and energy, climate change, and they're obviously all in one way or another a byproduct of us living out of harmony with the way the rest of the living world works. And how would you possibly do that except if you'd lost an ability to pay attention and really take in to the point that you were spontaneously drawn to live more and more in harmony? I don't think any of that's ever simple. I mean, that you might say is what cultivation is, mm-hmm. is the process of becoming more and more able to live in harmony with everything else that's going on around us in the universe. So it's obviously not trivial. But on the other hand, if you don't get started in that direction, when you're young, if there aren't any significant reinforcers mm-hmm. in our social environments day to day, of course you'll end up with a society that really can't even pay attention to the fact that it gets energy from some place that no other creatures on the earth get energy, or it produces an extraordinary amount of waste when nothing else in nature produces any waste. I mean, these are blatant differences. Mm-hmm. And the real question is, how come we don't notice this until it's a problem? And then somebody has a campaign and somebody says, oh, wow, the earth's heating up, we got to do something. Right. So it's hard for me to imagine any of the core problems. And the same is true of all the social imbalances. People have to live together. I mean, that's, again, part of being in harmony. We have to be able to live together. To think that it's just about me and how I live and somehow I can be indifferent or basically blind to how others live shows that we're simply not able to pay attention. So, yeah, I think it's all the same stuff.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.